When Jesus delivered his manifesto on what it means to be a follower of his, we call it the Sermon on the Mount, the very first words out of his mouth were, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs." This sounds distinctly un-American and against common sense in a difficult world. We believe the blessing of God shows in our material success, and yet Jesus says, "Blessed are you," for exactly the opposite. Jesus' lifestyle guide builds a contrasting society out of sync with the normal order of the world, and certainly out of sync with normal America. Let's call it the new normal. Jesus is talking here about fundamental humility, where I know I'm spiritually bankrupt without him, and so does God. Only an empty glass can be filled. One of my most common prayers is, "God, I need you." It's all that's on my mind many days. It's not out of guilt, but out of reality. I need God. I'm poor in spirit. It's not wallowing, it's worshiping. I'm free from the guilt, but I know I'm just empty without God. When I'm poor in spirit, I'm dependent on him and his character and resources. It's a basic acknowledgement that in and of myself, I'm inadequate for life all by myself. It's also understanding the spiritual nature of the life in me, and that's what I want. I want to be free, not saddled. So I keep my hands open, my eyes open, my heart open, and my faith open every day. I'm not approaching God as a worm, but rather knowing how much of life is a gift, especially God's life. We come to see that meaning is not found in our stuff, our vacations, our success, our country, or other people's approval, or even within ourselves. There's a spiritual realm centered in God that is far more important and actually meaningful. God cannot possess our hearts unless he has first emptied out the part that is already filled by someone or something else. Oswald Chambers wrote, quote, "As long as we have a conceited, self-righteous idea that we can do this thing if God will help us, God has to allow us to go on until we break the neck of our ignorance over some obstacle. Then we will be willing to come and receive from him. The bedrock of Jesus Christ's kingdom is poverty, not possession. Not decisions for Christ, but a sense of absolute futility. I cannot begin to do it. Then, Jesus says, you are blessed. That is the entrance, and it takes us a long while to believe we are poor. The knowledge of our own poverty brings us to the moral frontier where Jesus Christ works." Unquote. After I have denied myself and emptied myself, realizing that I am just a shell with dead bones and a dead soul inside, I come to the place of complete and utter dependence on God. I have nothing to offer in that regard. I have no spiritual worthiness. I can do nothing to contribute to grace. I am at God's mercy, and that's the way it should be. My heart cries out to God. All initiative, all action, everything is his. Life begins when I see that I am not the center of order and the source of wisdom, but God is. I am poor in spirit, and God is God. The hard things in life, instead of paralyzing us and beating us to death and despair, are the necessary conditions for us to learn the truth that life centered on me is false, but life centered on God is everything. The only thing that takes away my personal poverty is to be filled with the life of God. All that matters is God's will and God's kingdom. Blessedness isn't a way of being happy or God's way of rewarding you. It's more like a description of the way to connect with God. We see in all of this manifesto that Jesus is describing himself, which was also a description of what he had come to make us into. Our blessedness has nothing to do with American things like beauty, prosperity, entitlement, individualism, or power, but instead on our ability to experience the character of Jesus, starting with not giving much thought to ourselves. As C.S. Lewis said, Christian humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less.